Charles Manson has been called many things: the devil incarnate, the most evil man in the world, and even the Messiah. By far the most used reference to him is that he was a master manipulator. The key to Manson's control, as with all cult leaders, was to ensure that followers saw him not only as an all-powerful Messiah-like figure, but also as they were members of a superior elite with the solution to the world's problems, even if it meant killing for their Messiah. But what if Manson was on the receiving end of being manipulated? What if a far greater and more experienced manipulator had their hooks in Manson and his family? Join bad things as we look at a conspiracy theory that is quickly becoming a conspiracy fact. Was Charles Manson and his crazed killer hippie family a part of the CIA's brainwashing MK-Ultra program? What was, or as some think still is, MK-Ultra, and how does it tie in with the Manson family? On November 28, 1953, Frank Olson, a biological warfare scientist working for the US Army, fell to his death from the 10th floor of the Manhattan Statler Hotel. According to law enforcement, he took his own life. 9 days earlier, Olson, who had discussed quitting his job and informed his wife he had made a terrible mistake, had been secretly dosed with LSD by a CIA operative. Olson's sons are confident that their father's death was not caused by a psychological breakdown, maybe exacerbated by the secret LSD dose. Instead, they think he was killed to keep CIA secrets classified. Olson's work had brought him into contact with the man who would deliberately poison him, Sidney Gottlieb, the director of one of the most notorious CIA experiments in history, MK-Ultra. Sidney Gottlieb, or the Black Sorcerer as some have called him, headed MK-Ultra, which started on April 13, 1953, on the orders of CIA Director Allen Dulles. Its goal was to produce mind-controlling drugs to employ against the Soviet bloc in reaction to allegations that Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean forces used mind control tactics on US prisoners of war during the Korean War. The CIA intended to use similar tactics on its own prisoners of war, manipulate foreign leaders, as well as designing numerous harebrained schemes to drug Fidel Castro. The CIA invested millions of dollars in researching methods of influencing and controlling a subject's mind, as well as obtaining information from obstinate individuals during interrogation. Some historians argue that one purpose of MK-Ultra and similar CIA experiments was to develop a Manchurian candidate-like subject. A Manchurian candidate is a supposed sleeper agent who has been indoctrinated or manipulated with drugs, or has been brainwashed to function as a political proxy, or in extreme cases, an assassin. Derived from the novel The Manchurian Candidate and subsequent movies, it personifies an undercover agent who, upon activation, is unknowingly programmed to execute a predetermined mission. Traditional methods of psychological brainwashing were not working for Gottlieb and his cohort of scientists. They needed to find a solution. This solution came in the form of a Swiss chemist named Albert Hofmann at Sandoz Laboratories. Hofmann accidentally discovered LSD in 1943, and by 1947, Sandoz was marketing LSD as a psychiatric cure-all, claiming it cured everything from schizophrenia, criminal behavior, sexual perversions, and alcoholism. Gottlieb didn't want a cure. He wanted a cause. The CIA introduced LSD to the United States by purchasing the entire world's supply for $240,000 and distributing it to American hospitals, clinics, prisons, and research facilities through CIA front companies. Without the subject's knowledge, LSD was administered to CIA employees, military personnel, physicians, government agents, prostitutes, the mentally ill, prisoners, and members of the general public to study their reactions. LSD, through the CIA, had become central to the counterculture of the 1960s. The MK-Ultra program has an unknown number of victims, but some famous and truly infamous names are among those that are known. Ken Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and a source of inspiration in the counterculture movement, unknowingly took part in an MK Ultra project while he was a graduate student at Stanford University. Ted Kaczynski, or the Unabomber, was said to be a subject of a voluntary psychological study, alleged by some sources to have been part of MK Ultra at Harvard. In total, Kaczynski spent 200 hours as part of the study, which was described as a purposely brutalizing psychological experiment. In exchange for a reduced sentence, the notorious Boston mobster Whitey Bulger was subjected to LSD testing while incarcerated in a federal prison in Atlanta. During the course of 18 months, Bulger and the other inmates underwent continual LSD experimentation. In his journal, Bulger detailed horrible LSD experiences, followed by thoughts of suicide and deep depression. Author Philip Nelson has stated, "Within my books relating to the three major 1960s assassinations, we established that Lee Harvey Oswald, James L. Ray, and Sirhan Sirhan had all been subjected to various sorts of mind control under the CIA operation known as MK Ultra and its numerous related subsets. During the 1973 Watergate-induced government-wide panic, CIA Director Richard Helms issued an order to destroy all MK Ultra files, thereby preventing a comprehensive investigation into the MK Ultra projects. Fortunately, a cache of 20,000 documents had been wrongfully stored in a financial records building and were discovered in 1977 in response to a Freedom of Information Act request. In 1994, a congressional subcommittee revealed that up to 500,000 unwitting Americans were endangered, damaged, or destroyed by secret CIA and military tests between 1940 and 1974. This included MK Ultra victims. How does Manson fit into this dark CIA nightmare? With his 2019 book and a 20-year odyssey of research, death threats, and multiple lawsuits, Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s, author Tom O'Neill caused a sensation by claiming that Manson was a CIA asset or experiment. In 1967, and at the age of 32, Manson had spent half his life in prison for a variety of offenses as petty as stealing a letter from a postbox and as serious as raping a young boy. After being released from California's Terminal Island prison that same year, Manson traveled north to San Francisco. During his time in the Bay Area, Manson's illustrious life bizarrely intersected with 4 separate drug research studies financed by the CIA. O'Neill has since confirmed with documentation Manson's involvement in 2 of these studies. Roger Smith, a Berkeley doctoral student and Manson's parole officer, participated in a CIA-funded program investigating LSD and drug use among the hippie population of San Francisco. Smith would also grant his unknowing research subjects a measure of legal immunity by virtue of his status as a parole officer. Smith, despite having the authority to revoke Manson's parole and send him back to prison after countless petty crimes, refrained from doing so and may have even helped Manson avoid prison several times after being arrested. So Manson remained free, drug-dependent, and under the scrutiny of an MK Ultra doctor. Roger Smith's time at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic enabled him to work with David Smith, a medical doctor with pharmacology knowledge and the clinic's founder. In return for funding from the CIA, the 2 researched recreational drug usage among the patients they treated and most likely supplied LSD to. The clinic's physicians and therapists soon noticed regular visits from teenage runaways and addicts affiliated with Manson's cult. The girls would visit the clinic for STD and pregnancy treatment, while Manson would most likely pick up his MK Ultra-funded LSD. Another of the clinic's researchers, Louis Jolly West, conducted a separate covert investigation of LSD and drug use among hippies. West, a CIA psychologist with expertise in deprogramming victims of brainwashing, converted a deteriorating Victorian property near the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic into a fake hippie crash pad as part of a study on drug addiction and homelessness. West worked for the CIA with Gottlieb and is regarded by some as his right-hand man. Incidentally, West was also the psychiatrist who examined Jack Ruby after he shot and killed Lee Harvey Oswald. Some accounts of this examination claim that Ruby was in perfect mental health before seeing West, whereas after seeing West he became paranoid, hysterical, and suffered a nervous breakdown. In late 1968, Manson left San Francisco for Los Angeles. A year later, his insane behavior, which some think was exacerbated by the CIA's LSD study, reached its deadly conclusion. While researching his book, O'Neill also discovered evidence that Los Angeles area law enforcement officers may have mishandled or were illegally influenced by a three-lettered agency in many areas of the Manson investigation. O'Neill alleges that the Los Angeles Police Department illegally destroyed files from the 1969 Tate LaBianca investigation. However, O'Neill admits that Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor in the Manson family murder trial, may have simply forgotten to return the documents, which he used to author his 1976 book on the Manson family, Helter Skelter. Bugliosi's book provided a watered-down, curated narrative of the 1969 killings, leaving out the CIA's involvement and Manson's uncanny ability to stay out of prison, no matter what crime he committed up until the 1969 slayings. In Chaos, however, O'Neill refutes several of Bugliosi's claims. Stephen Kay, who co-prosecuted the Manson murder trial with Bugliosi, informed O'Neill that the newly discovered evidence in Chaos may have been enough to overturn the original judgments on the family. The politics surrounding a hypothetical retrial, as well as the unavoidable media aftermath, would have resulted in a public relations nightmare for the CIA and the California legal system. Furthermore, investigators believe Manson's acolytes may have been involved in between 12 and 36 additional unsolved murders, which, if it went to trial, could have blown the lid off the CIA's LSD research projects. With new theories come questions, and the internet has a couple for O'Neill. Was Manson conscious of being an asset of the CIA? If he was, why didn't he shout it from the rooftops during one of the many rambling, over-the-top interviews he gave post-conviction? If he wasn't aware, had MKUltra achieved its Manchurian Candidate goals? Manson's narrative about the motive for the murders has never changed. He always said it was to get a brother out of jail, referring to committing copycat murders to get Bobby Beausoleil off his murder charge related to the Gary Hinman murder. He has never said that they didn't know what they were doing, although some of the killer's stories have changed radically over the years. As for MKUltra successfully creating assassins who couldn't remember what had been done to them or what they've done to others, Gottlieb commented on the results of MKUltra experiments and dismissed his entire effort for the CIA's MKUltra program as useless. Would the CIA have unleashed the Manson family on the world and expected them to not get caught and jeopardize the whole program? In other cases of violent MKUltra victims, they usually committed their crimes on their own. Controlling a crowd of violent, delusional, anti-establishment and anti-authority hippies would have been a nightmare for the CIA to handle, no matter how much LSD they were supplying them. And why would the CIA waste resources on the murders of celebrities and their groupies instead of targeted assassinations as has been suggested with the JFK, RFK, and MLK plots? If MKUltra was set up for international covert operations, there would have been more worthwhile targets to use resources on. O'Neill is the first to admit that there is no definitive proof that Manson was a CIA asset. My goal isn't to say what did happen, it's to prove that the official story didn't. But the coincidences keep racking up, and he asserts that he could have doubled the book's pages if his editor had let him. Surviving MKUltra documents identify 80 institutions, including 44 universities and colleges, and 185 researchers who worked on the project. West was one of less than a dozen accused scientists who covertly took part in MKUltra under academic cover. No one, including the Black Sorcerer Sidney Gottlieb, top CIA officer Richard Helms, or West, has suffered any legal consequences. In fact, no researcher involved in MKUltra has ever been investigated by the federal government. Do you think Charles Manson was a willing participant in MKUltra or an experiment gone rogue? Leave us your comments below. We would love to hear from you.